And we are live. Hey everybody, what's going on? Steve Kreiner, the Dog Soldier here. This is episode, I really couldn't tell you what episode this is because for a simple fact is I'm either having to pull them because I make somebody mad or I say something wrong. Really not for sure. And we've been having some technical difficulties, but the podcast is going good. I see a lot of guys are watching, a lot of guys are chatting in the chat room. Before we get started, and I'm telling you right now, this is a podcast that for all you guys watching, you're never going to hear another podcast like this unless you get our special guest on there. But before we get started, I do want to say this podcast is brought to you by TacticalPredatorHunter.com for all your Dog Soldier gear. You can get flex tones there. You can get bog pockets. You can get Rambo bikes now. You can get absolutely anything I use on the show. And like I tell you guys every week, I have the show fine-tuned. I'm not using gimmicks. I'm not using bull crap. I'm not lying to you guys. I'm telling you right now, if you buy something from my store and you don't like it, within 24 hours, I tell everybody to send it back. It's that simple. This is going to be an awesome podcast. So remember, TacticalPredatorHunter.com for all your Dog Soldier gear. And that's the last plug you're going to get this whole podcast because I've got 6 or 7 cookies right here. I got a jug of orange juice. And I got a bottle of water because I have a great friend, a longtime friend, and we go way back. And I'm glad to have him back in the mainstream of predator hunting. Everybody, give a welcome to Rich Higgens. Rich, what's up, buddy?
Good stuff. Wow, heck of an introduction.
Well,
I'm
I practiced that all day.
So much for that podcast. You just blew it.
I've been practicing that all day. That's a good thing about my podcast. We can really say whatever we want to say or do whatever we want to do. And, you know, one thing about podcasts, Rich, and I talked to you a little bit on the phone today about it. One thing about podcasts is these people actually get to know us. Because we don't, I got cartoonists out there, Tim Spike Davis. I'm a cartoon character now, and
I've often suspected.
And the first one he ever drew of me was a guy with a cake, and it said, "Don't sugarcoat it, because I don't like it that way." So, Rich, I'm glad to have you on.
Well, does this mean that if I drop an F-bomb, the FCC isn't going to nuke us?
If you drop an F-bomb, everybody watching is probably going to like you a lot better. So Rich, I'm glad to have you on, man. How you been doing?
Been kind of lowballing it for some time now. I haven't been calling in quite a while, honestly. From it being an all-consuming passion that I ate, slept. I actually dreamed about calling. We moved out to a house in the desert north of Scottsdale specifically to live in the middle of 3 separate packs that I knew were resident there. And I called 7 days a week. I no longer wonder why my marriage failed again. I simply accepted it. But it was an absolute obsession. And because of little health issues over the last couple of 3 years or so, I had to, I stopped giving seminars. I had to resign as president of the 2 predator calling clubs. I haven't been going out filming, shooting. I finally sighted in a couple of guns a couple of weeks ago. I took a camera out, took a young lady calling, and we did some photography. And then you called me. And so it's a sign from God. You're a messenger. You're an angel. It's time for me to get back in this. And
you better watch it. You're going to get both struck by lightning. I got a lot of electricity running through this damn basement. Shit's gonna get wild if you keep talking like that.
When you did call, though, I smiled for a day. I really did. I had some great memories. Even our very first adventure together is memorable, and
I shot the
I was
tail
having to
off a
smile about
coyote.
that.
I shot the tail off a
Well,
coyote.
yeah, you did that. I was really impressed. I thought you did it on purpose because I
Yeah.
used to shoot them through the ear because I didn't want to kill them, but
Seen
I had to have a coup on them.
seen
So
we seen
I
11.
actually thought that you did it purpose.
Yeah, we seen 11 coyotes that day, and I didn't kill one. I re-
Which one didn't you kill?
I didn't kill any of them. You remember?
Oh, okay, that's different. That's a little different. Yeah, but you got back to camp and you got to say, what was it? Man came all the way to Arizona and all we got was a little tail.
Yep, that's right. Yep. Hey, I got more tail than anybody else did in that camp that weekend. Remember when we?
Well, this is fresh in my mind. I've got to share this. You were making a video, so you brought your Canon GL2.
Yep.
And you were very athletic. You were a rodeo clown, bullfighter, and so you were strong. You were fast, which served you well that day. Because what's the name of that river that we were calling along? Do you remember the name of that?
No, but it was right there.
There's a big dry river, so at least a half mile across. There was a live part of it that was just a few feet wide that had water in it, but the rest of it was dry riverbed.
Between Phoenix and Picacho Peak.
No, it was down south of Tucson towards Nogales. It was we were right by Continental.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah.
And the river banks were 15 feet high, and it was just cliffs straight down from. It was all carved up from flash floods, and it was a good half mile across. It was big.
Yeah.
But you thought it was a good place to set up on the top of the rim of that bank, and I was wanting to noodle a coyote.
Yeah.
And so you set up on the edge of the bank. And it was kind of jagged because, it was vertical and it was 15 feet high, and then parts of it would collapse and you'd leave little chunks of it missing. Well, you set up on one of the little protrusions out there, got your camera all set up, and my dog just fell in love with you. She wanted to stay up there with you instead of go down there in the river with me. And I got set up, laid down, got all my mist settled everywhere, misted the whole area down, climbed underneath my camo netting, put the motion decoy on my chest, and I started hand calling. And all of a sudden I heard a little bit of rumbling, and I look over your way, and it was all dust. And I sat up and looked, and you were hanging on the edge of the riverbed by your fingers. The bank, 15 feet up in the air, everything had collapsed. Maddie was laying at the bottom of the bank. Your camera was buried under about 4 feet of dirt. Yeah. And you were hanging by your fingernails, and all of a sudden the right one gave way. That jumped out, and I can remember you hanging by one arm, looking down below you, and then just letting go. And you landed on your feet.
I had her licked.
It was impressive.
I had her licked until I called Maddie up to sit by me in that little 50 more pounds or whatever she weighed.
The final straw.
I mean, we had her licked. I mean, it was awesome. And I remember a lot of guys in the chat room right now, Rich, we run a chat room during this live stream, and a lot of people's talking about the heat. It wasn't too hot, that one, but I remember when I come and hunted that contest with Tyler, it was 104 degrees in the shade, and we were killing coyotes.
And there was no shade.
Yeah, that's right. If you found shade, it was under a bush. Yeah, man.
Well,
it's
like they get used to the heat. They have to function. It's like the coyotes up there in Wyoming with you. They say coyotes won't come in during the wind. Well, they starve to death up there in Wyoming because the wind always blows.
Yeah.
It's something that they adjust to. They adjust to the heat down here.
I've got to when I'm killing coyotes or when I'm calling coyotes, I have got to where unless the snow's crunchy, I go. I remember when I first started. I mean, when the wind blew heavy, I wanted to stay home, and I had the luxury of staying home, and we talked about that a little earlier. I had the luxury of staying home before I did it as a business, and now that I'm doing it as a business, I have to produce, and I don't have them luxuries anymore. But there's only one condition that I really never like. If it's crunchy snow, I pack my stuff and heads 500 miles one way or the other. It's crunchy snow. I hate crunchy snow.
Okay. Well, not a big concern right here.
Yeah, that's right. I do. I was 27 years old when we went on that hunt.
Uh-huh.
It's been almost
Yeah, you were
11
a first
years.
base kid.
Yep, 11 years ago, almost. I remember it like it was yesterday. And what we're going to
So do I.
talk we're going to talk a lot in the podcast. We got so much to talk about, and I'm probably going to have you on again, of course, but everything has changed so much in 11 years. And I remember 11 years ago, I was from Missouri. 12 years ago, I had never went anywhere besides Missouri. And but I was successful where everybody said you couldn't be successful, and that's just because there wasn't coyote hunters there. I mean, it wasn't really that tough. I did have some good numbers, but I remember that was my first trip out of the house, and then I just went rabid after that. But that that was like I tell everybody. I mention your name quite a bit in the podcast, and if you've listened or watched, a lot of people you'll see it, and a lot of people will probably tell you, you've been a big part of my coyote calling career, and I just had to have you on the podcast because when it comes
Then
to
I apologize to your wife and everybody that's important to you. I do apologize.
yeah, it will coyote hunting will consume a man for
It,
sure. I mean, I turned it into my business. I turned it into my business, and I remember the first trip I come down there to you, I was filming for Calling the Dogs, my own DVD. And then the second trip I come down, I was still filming. Well, I was contest hunting with Tyler. And then the third trip, or the third or fourth trip, is right after I got hooked up with HS. And that's when I really started learning the business and learning about life a little bit. And I'll tell you right now, before we get into the nitty gritty of coyotes, in the 11, I mean, I've called coyotes ever since I was 16, and I'm 38 now. Or actually, before that, I tell everybody I started way before that, but it took me 3 years to kill a coyote, so I don't count them. But I have seen so much change in the last 12 years of doing this for a career. Not only I've seen coyotes change, but I've seen people change. I've seen the industry change. I've seen trends change. Man, can you believe? And can you believe? Can you believe how much the coyote calling scene has changed in the last, let's just say, 12 years?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And in all honesty, I do not think it's for the better, simply because I'm lazy. I used to enjoy going out and sitting down, blowing a call, and coyotes would come. It was just that simple, honestly. I honestly remember the first day that we blanked ever, and it was in 1994. And I was a little confused and know really what was going on, and had been studying them because it wasn't necessary. You just sit down, blow a call, and the coyotes would come. And we didn't try for numbers because it wasn't difficult. We would go out early in the morning, blow a call, coyotes would come, we'd kill one or two, skin them out, and then spend the rest of the day terrorizing jackrabbits because we loved shooting, but we didn't want to have to mess with that smelly, bloody mess that results in killing these coyotes.
Yeah,
But it's the simple fact of the matter is that there have been electronic calls for a very, very long time.
Yep.
But WT started changing the industry. And that good gentleman actually would stated in his promotional literature that buy a WT and become an instant expert. and he had a great call. The electronics were just excellent, state of the art for that time. His library was world class. As a matter of fact, Hollywood leased a lot of his sounds, and why it didn't make such a huge impact is because they were priced out of reach of the average person.
Yeah.
Foxco came along, and good business practices, a good, decent, low-end call initially, and they didn't sit on their laurels. They went into conducted a lot of R&D, and they kept improving their product. They kept tabs of all the callers of their client base, listened to their complaints and to their wish lists, and improve their calls. And now, and I don't know how they've amassed this impressive sound library, but it is impressive, and it just covers all bases. Coyotes will respond to a predator call for one of 7 different behavioral motivations, and their sound library covers all
everything.
Of those.
Yeah, there's 500
several
sounds.
times over. 500
plus sounds, I think.
Yeah, well, it's very, very impressive. But now then, I was president of Phoenix Wildlife Callers for quite a while. It was the largest physical predator calling club, I believe, in the nation, and it. In bylaws, predator electronics were excluded. They insisted everybody use hand calls to develop their calling skills, and it actually worked. You have to pay a little closer attention. You have to develop better hunting predator skills. You're using hand calls because you're the focus of attention now, and you're generating motion. So you have to learn how to approach your stand, how to stalk your stand, so they haven't watched you come in or heard you come in, so they don't know what you are, where you are, what the source of the sounds are. Motion doesn't frighten the coyote, but when that motion directs their attention in form, that's when you have problems. You have to learn proper camouflage and on-stand discipline. You have to be disciplined, experienced caller to enjoy considerable success with the hand calling. With the electronics, just like the WT founder, I guess I can't use names. I'm not going to get myself in trouble anymore.
Oh, no, that's fine.
Say again?
I said you're good. Keep rolling.
Oh, okay. Great. I think I've just lost your sound. Plug me back in.
Can you hear me now?
Hello. Not out of my headphones, I can't.
Uh-oh. I don't... I've got you plugged in on my end. It must be on your end.
Well, it has to be. I just took off my headphones and I'm using the phone speaker now. Anyway, everybody becomes an instant expert, and they don't have to practice the discipline. If they don't commit a lot of mistakes, they can just still enjoy a reasonable degree of success. But the fact of the matter is that they're educating a lot of coyotes, and coyotes are capable of observational learning, and they're also capable of passing along those lessons to family and group members.
Yeah,
and it only takes 3 generations to instill a characteristic trait. And since they're on estrus, that means only 3 years for each generation. And we've had, how long has Fox Pro been hot and heavy? About
10 years, I guess.
12 years, something like that.
Yeah.
They've instilled characteristic traits 4 times over.
You know,
so they are making a big difference. That year that you came down here with us, the year before that was Predator Master's first banquet and hunt. And I took out Paul Waite, who was the editor of Trapper Predator Color magazine, and Loki Lochner, who was a professional hunter from South Africa, who specialized in predator hunts, specifically black-backed jackal and caracal. And I put them on very first stand. Tyler and I called in coyotes for them on the very first stand. Yes, 9 coyotes. And I had absolute confidence that I could do that. We set up. I had Loki right there to my right with a borrowed gun, my gun. He didn't even bring a rifle. And I did a couple little vocalizations, and I did a couple little prey distress. And with, I would say, less than 1 minute, we had a coyote popped up right out of the wash 20 yards in front of him, and Loki shot and killed his first American jackal. I cannot do that now. Yeah. I cannot guarantee that I'll even put 1 coyote in front of somebody now.
Yeah. You know, a while ago you really hit it on the head, when you said you used to go out and call coyotes, pretty much. And the biggest thing that I absolutely love when I see somebody online, and I never portray an expert. I'm just me. I just go with the flow and kill stuff if I get a shot at it, and I just wing it and make shit up as I go. But when somebody jumps on my back or somebody jumps on somebody else's back for being skunked somewhere, that shows me right there they don't like the experience level of, like, coyote hunters today will find a pocket of coyotes in certain parts of the country and they expect that to happen everywhere, so then they're instant experts. And I got skunked. I got skunked 7 or 8 years ago in Montana on a 3-day hunt. And people give you trouble. Some of the people that we used to run with, and you remember old Tim Anderson, he always, well, you got skunked in Montana. You haven't got out of your state, or you haven't hunted coyotes long if you've never gotten skunked. And I mean, it's a whole different ball game, and they associate. The pressure levels are through the roof. And before I get too far ahead of you, I want to see if I remember what you taught me 11 years ago. The 7 triggers of a coyote. You got territorial, greed, social structure, entertainment, food, breeding, and I always miss 1 or 2. So you're gonna have to fill in the blanks here. I want to really touch on the 7 triggers, because these people watching right here, if everybody will stop what they're doing and focus right now, because and you changed my wife asked me today, she said, Emily said, so who's the guy that's going to be on the podcast? And I said, a really good friend of mine that changed my life forever. And I've learned so much from you, and I learned so much from all the others that I've shared camp with and everything else. But the 7 triggers changed my life forever. So everybody listening right now are really, if they'll just focus for 5 minutes, I want you to tell us the 7 triggers, and I want you to kind of explain them to us real quick, because them 7 triggers control everything in my eyes. One thing I don't do, Rich, that I did even 8 or 6 years ago, is running with you quite a while and really learning and pay attention. One thing I did, and I'll honestly, I don't sugarcoat nothing, and I don't bullshit or nothing like that. So I will be honest with you. I really took something I learned from you, and I tried to make more out of it, and I tried to make it a rocket science, and I tried to be on top of my game. And then I found myself slide off the rock, and realize I'm back to square one. So I had to start all over and go back to the basics to be consistently successful. But the 7 triggers never change.
No, they don't. But their order of importance will change a little bit during, according to the 4 biological seasons, the 4 social seasons of the coyote, behavioral seasons. But the 7 motivations are just etched in granite someplace. They do, you're right, they do not change. But things like the 7th, which is hunger, that changes when things, the times are plenty, or even areas are plentiful. Like B.A. Danner did a 3-year study of the FICA feed grounds down by Continental in southern Arizona, and they had 30,000 beef in those pens, and so they were losing like almost 10 a day. Usually from respiratory ailments. And they would just throw a lasso around the heel and hook them up to the tractor and drag them out into the sand dunes just to the west or the east of the pins, which is on the FICA environmental area. And not FICA, the Santa Rita environmental area. And so there's a huge dead pile there that's being replenished on a daily basis. And it was in an environmental protected area, so there was no hunting. And it was an ideal place for this biologist to conduct a study. And he discovered that they had 40 some odd colored coyotes. And the males had a home range. None of them had protected, defended territories. They had overlapping home ranges that were shared, but the males were about as much as 7 miles long and about up to 2 miles wide. The females were a little better than half that, and the yearlings and the young of year never ventured more than 200 yards from the feed lots. And did I lose you there?
No, I'm still here. I'm just soaking all this up.
Anyway, the reason why they shared overlapping ranges. And that is true of a lot of southern Arizona because there's resources are unlimited. They do not have to establish defended territory. And I don't believe that there's any such thing as a hungry coyote in southern Arizona simply because they eat so much of these mesquite beans.
Yes.
The rabbits run right in front of them. When they look at them, they're scat. It's nothing but mesquite seeds. They're not eating anything else.
Yep.
And so they're just not hungry, and it's available all year long. They do not have to establish defended territory to protect reserves like they do up in the northern states with these long winters. They have to establish defended territories in order to raise their litters. And so hunger is not an issue in some areas as much as it is in others, and hunger isn't as much of an issue in any area during times of plenty, spring, summer, etc. It becomes a real issue in lean times and hard winters, and that's when they'll come in with enthusiasm. But it really doesn't matter if they're hungry or not, because greed is one of the motivations, and their social structure is extremely complex. Play is essential to establish familial bonds, and the more aggressive puppies do not initiate play, so they don't establish these heavy, close bonds, and they're the ones who take the tit of their choice, the suckling. They're the ones who, when the parents come in and regurgitate dinner. They're the ones who get in the middle of it and get first lap. That's why they continue to be bigger and stronger. And so greed is an essential survival trait. If they don't behave in a greedy manner, they go hungry then. That's for sure. Dr. Franz Kaminsen, research biologist who did that great study up on the National Elk Reserve there in Wyoming, not far from you. He sent me a video a few years ago of 3 coyotes on a frozen river up there. An otter had a hole in the ice, and it brought a carp up and laid it on the edge of the ice, and the coyotes went down and tried to steal it from it. And it took a little doing, but they actually snatched this big fish from the otter, and then the 3 of them had this tug of war. One of them grabbed it, ran off. The other 2 caught up with him and took it away from him. Then they had a tug of war. Finally, after a long bout, they tore it in half, trying to, in the struggle. And the 2 coyotes with a piece took off in different directions and left the 3rd one there with nothing. That's just typical nature of the coyote.
Yeah.
And it's not like Lady and the Tramp, where the tramp pushes a meatball over to his girlfriend.
Yeah.
Here, he'll beat the heck out of his girlfriend to take the fish away from her.
Yeah,
but greed is so we've got hunger and greed right there, and competition is one of the motivations, and that goes kind of overlapping with greed. They have to compete for food, and curiosity and entertainment are kind of overlapping. Coyotes are intelligent animals. They really are. They're very intelligent.
Yes.
And Dr. Franz, not Franz, Dr. Jaeger has been studying little guys for 30 years, and he believes that they're capable of cognitive reason, and entertainment is necessary for an intelligent mind, and so they play is very, very important to them. Dr. Wells conducted a long study of the importance of play in social development amongst coyotes. And those that engage in play more often remained with the group for longer periods of time. Those that did not engage in forged strong bonds, and those are the ones that dispersed most rapidly. Some of them as early as August, when they're only 4 months old, and on average. And so what we have: hunger, greed, curiosity, entertainment. That leaves social and territorial concerns, and both of those are kind of overlapping. And because they're actually the most vocal of all North American mammals. And they have a very complex communication system. There's the olfactory, tactile, and auditory. And the auditory signals are the vocalizations that we use to entice them, to bring them in. And only the resident coyotes are vocal. The transients and nomads are usually non-vocal because, announcing their presence, their location generally isn't to their benefit.
Yeah.
And so they're mostly silent. Whereas with the coyotes, the group yippee primary function, you know what that is. That's that's the sound that's most closely associated with packs of coyotes, and it's what Major Boddicker calls the joy of life call. It has several functions, and one of them is passive territorial defense. Because of by announcing the location and the presence of a resident pack. It alerts every coyote within hearing that they are in that area, and it's not a good idea to intrude. So they avoid that area. And by the same token, if there's a lot of calling, if there's a lot of howling on consecutive nights, all transients or adjacent packs that are ready to disperse to move along know to avoid that area. So it helps in settling those territorial issues. Because of that, whenever a coyotes hear a group howl, they will group howl in response for the very same reason, announcing their location. And then the next pack will howl and announce their location. And Major Boddicker said that he can visualize a wave of this extending from middle America all the way out to the coast. That's a dandy concept. But
I love that guy.
Yeah.
He has to be one of the quirkiest guys I've ever met in my life.
The what?
The quirkiest guy. I mean, he's just kind of like, he was kind of grumpy at the camp out. I think because he had to listen to Leonard and Leonard's buddy all the time, but but I'm telling you, Major, he's quirky, he's happy, he's go lucky. I talked to him on the phone quite a bit a couple years ago. Matter of fact, all the time. And I was entertaining, trying to buy Critter Call. And I entertained Ed Siri too a little bit, but is Ed Siri still alive, Rich?
Yes, he is, but he sold out. Mark Kane, Jack Kane's son, J.C. Calls, Cersei Calls.
Oh, yeah.
He bought him up, and he's the one who's producing the Siri Calls now.
Gotcha. So that's, I tried that too, and that I didn't get nowhere with that, but yeah. Huh. You still using your old PC6 and 7 and all them?
Oh, that's still I had 4 calls on my lanyard, and the AP6, AP1 are number 1 and 2, always there.
Yeah.
A howler, and a good jack call, but that's my good long range call. And then the others are to hit all of the other 7 motivational triggers.
Yeah.
I call it my kitchen sink stand. I'll sit down on a stand and I'll use every single one of them. And sometimes call steadily for 45 minutes or so before bringing one in or moving along.
You remember that time I fell asleep in Arizona hand calling? Do you remember that?
Yeah. That's when you know that you've been on stand long enough.
Jiminy Christmas, I was like, I remember you'd call a stand and I'd call a stand. Well, about 1 o'clock in the day with the sun beating down on you, and we had a few adult beverages, the night before, and I was tired in my defense, and I remember sitting there and I had my hand propped up on my knee, just, and then I woke up. I don't know how long I was asleep.
I thought it was just part of the technique. Those guys from Oklahoma would call for like 30 seconds, and then they would be silent for 5 minutes.
Yep.
And I thought that's what you were doing.
Man.
But, so for your listeners who buy into the old saw that you spend 10 minutes on stand and move along, that 70% of all coyotes respond in the first 2 minutes, and the other 30% that will respond. And I see these numbers, these statistics all the time, and Just heavy sigh.
I
Like Gary Clevenger, whom you know well,
Yep.
told me that 87.3% of all statistics are made up. And I said, "You just made that up, didn't you?" And he just smiled. But actually,
I tell everybody 13, 14, 15 minutes, and it's because I'm I'm all over the place. I can't sit still, but when I hunted with Clevenger that time at the camp, speaking of Clevenger, I was the only guy in the whole world that liked him at one time, and then he bailed on me. I don't think the guy likes me now, but I remember when I was like, it was just me and Clevenger, and I don't know what I ever did to him, but anyway, my first article, and I mentioned, I think I touched a little bit on the 7 triggers I had learned from you, but I didn't get into it because I just feel like I didn't know enough about it to write the article, obviously, but I was talking about you and hunting with you and Clevenger out west, and the article was called "Thick Cover Coyotes on the Stand Up." It was in 2006. 2006 or 7, I think, in Predator Extreme. It was about calling coyotes in thick timber, which, when we were in thick timber in Missouri, we'd stand up. Well, then Clevenger, that's all that guy does. And, he was on to something. He didn't care how bad it looked because nobody else stopped there. So, that was kind of his comfort zone,
he has refined that to an art form. And I bring him out, when I was president of clubs, I would bring him out here from California fairly often, 4 times I believe it was over a 2-year period, to give that seminar on close cover shotgun tactics.
Yep.
And he used to win those Ironman contests with the California Pharmacologists Association.
Yeah.
They had 11 chapters, and they would all have their annual competitions, and he would always win those things, and with very impressive techniques. He used to call with Tyler, and he was also a member of Phoenix Pharmacologists.
Yeah.
And Arizona Predator Callers, and occasionally Dan Carey, such, and they'd always do really well. And Tyler and I were hunting with him on a club hunt down by Florence, and when on these hunts you rotate the caller. Every man gets a chance to do the calling, do a setup, and 3-man teams are the best because every man's responsible for his 120 degrees, and that way you never get backdoored. And would be people who've never done this, people are amazed how often that happens.
Yeah.
That they would never have seen those coyotes. It's because they want to sit down or set up overlooking the most attractive avenue of approach that appeals to them most, and so they get backdoored a lot.
Yeah.
And Gary was kind of poo-pooing that. It was his turn to call, and he went and stood up next to a saguaro, and there was a dead ocotillo lying around his feet, the dead branches.
Yep.
There. And he was standing in the shade, and he was looking out towards the northeast. So I set up to his right on the other side of a wash, about 30 yards away from him, and I was facing that 120 towards the west, and Tyler was set up to the west of him and facing that area. So we had our full 120 covered. And Tyler was watching a coyote come down the wash, and when he saw it, it was to his right, and he just picked it up on his peripheral vision, and it was close enough to Gary that he just let it go on right there, so Gary would pick it up.
Yeah.
And Tyler was shooting .243. The coyote comes up from Gary's left. Gary's looking out the distance in front of him. Coyote comes up from his 7 o'clock position, looks over and sniffs Gary's boots, and then turns around and picks his way through that ocotillo, picking the feet up and over quietly moving through it and off. And he was out about 30 yards moving away when Tyler shot it, and Gary would have never known that he had a coyote there sniffing his feet. It makes you wonder how often that happens, too.
I know a 2-mile stretch in northern Arizona that I could kill 10 coyotes on, or used to. And it was just me and a camera guy. So I was like, I mean, you get backdoored, every other stand because you could hear them in the gravel. I got to sitting with my back on the highway, and them damn things would they'd either come across the highway or they'd run around me and run on the pavement to cut my wind. They were it was like one out of every 2 or 3 coyotes was so, like, he'd done everything he was supposed to do and he stayed alive. And then all of a sudden you would get one that would jump over your right shoulder and run straight to the call and never even miss a beat. It's amazing. It's amazing. It's amazing. These coyotes, I just, if I ever I'll never get them figured out, but
you'll never be able to, because you do not know what they've experienced.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
The coyote's behavior is most greatly influenced by its most recent experiences, which, its behavior is absolutely determined by their level of security. And
Yes.
The level of security is most greatly influenced by its most recent experiences. If its most recent experience was hearing a strange sounding rabbit call and coming over and investigating it, and hearing a loud noise and a little burning sensation across his fanny, and he is in the next county, he's very less likely to respond to that sound under those circumstances again. And not only, it actually doesn't have to involve gunshots and even human is a major contributing factor, but it doesn't have to revolve or relate to hunting at all. The least secure, the most stressed out coyotes, the most difficult to hunt call were the coyotes on the Idaho National Lab research facility. Dr. Jager and the University of Utah were conducting 2 separate studies on those coyotes. I don't remember exactly how many coyotes were involved in this study. There were something like 6 or 7 family groups, and I believe there were 80 coyotes that were radio collared, and they had the big battery packs on them, and they were GPS monitored. They were interrogated by satellite once every 5 minutes. This way it wouldn't drain the batteries too quickly. They still had to replace the batteries every 6 weeks. And the first time that they would catch the coyote, it would be with traps, lake hole, and they could never catch them again, ever again, with the lake traps. They had to locate them with the UHF, whatever that frequency is, radio signals. They have antennas, and the directional antennas. They locate the coyotes with that. Send the helicopter out, and they blast a net over the coyote. Get out and place him into a canvas transport bag and take him to a processing location. And they pull a carnassial or tooth for cross-sectioning to age them if they haven't done so before. And they draw blood, remove the collar, that big old honking collar, and replace the batteries, and poke them and prod them, put them back in the bag, back on the helicopter, take them back to the capture site and release them. Once every 6 weeks, these coyotes are subjected to alien abduction. They are stressed.
Yeah.
I thought that since on the Idaho National Lab, the nuclear facility, there's been no predator suppression efforts since 1952. There have been no hunting permit allowed since like 1948. So they've never heard a gun go off. They've never been shot at. They've never heard a call. And so I went out there with Dr. Jager and his grad student expecting to sit down, do a little howling, have everything light up, do a little calling, and get overrun with herds and swarms of coyotes. Holy cow, what an eye-opener. As soon as I'd make a sound, we didn't know all this until after they retrieved these collars 4 to 6 weeks later, and did a computer animation and put it on a disc and sent it over to me. And it showed all these different lines, which were the alpha pair, male, female, the omega coyotes, males and females, and they even had 2 nomads that were calling. These were resident nomads, which I didn't even know such a thing existed. They didn't belong to any social group. They lived between defended territories, and so they spent their life avoiding other coyotes. I didn't even know that social phenomenon existed. But
I remember you telling me about that study years ago. If it's the same one.
It just amazed me. But coyotes are psychologically delicate.
Yes.
They do not handle stress well at all. Coyotes die on the examining table. Coyotes die after being released in a day or so sometimes. These Mexican gray wolves that are introduced up here in Arizona and New Mexico, one of the founding pack members, a female, she'd had 7 litters, and she died on the examining table after something like her 4th or 5th exams. She finally gave up. Remember that coyote that was made all the news back in New York? They found it on a subway train. All the pictures of the coyote huddled in a corner on a subway train. They captured it and took it to Central Park and released it there. Released him, he walked out of the way, keeled over dead.
That would suck.
They just don't handle the stress very well at all. And it translates to their behavior. You stress a coyote, and security levels diminish, then those things. Kathleen Fulmer did her master's thesis entitled Characterizing the Function of Coyote Barks and Howls Through the Use of Playback. And she would broadcast recordings of howls and barks to the resident coyotes on the ALE up at Hanford, Washington, one of Dr. Robert Crabtree's research sites. And on this one, I remember this one well because that's where I grew up, there in the Yakima Valley.
Yeah.
My dad worked out there. My sister worked out there at Hanford. And they had 113 radio-collared coyotes in 10 separate territories. And they had the entire social structure and the social position of each coyote. And he just turned all this over to this grad student. And she determined that coyotes responded vocally to group howls more often than lone howls, and they responded with a physical approach more often to lone howls. This is something that you might want to consider when you're doing your howling.
Yeah.
And that most often, again, these are research subjects, and so they're stressed. most often the coyotes would reposition themselves within their core territory. If they're out in towards the peripheries of their territories, whenever they'd hear these broadcast howls, they would head back to their core area, and they would remain there for sometimes a significant amount of time, either until they were rejoined by another group member, which would increase their sense of security, or until they had been there in the core area, a safe zone, long enough to increase their sense of security enough for them to make an approach or to respond with even. That's why you have these long delays sometimes between your calling or your howling and an answer.
Yeah, this year, actually the last 2 years, speaking of WT earlier, when we designed the FLX 500 and 1000, the Dog Soldier models, I elected to keep the sounds that we had used in the past on some other flex tone calls, but they're leased from Bill, which for everybody listening at home, Bill Marks owns Wildlife Technologies. But anyway, there's a sound on that, and I can't remember what Bill calls it, but on my call it's called hunting whines, and I did not name this sound. So for everybody thinking Steve Kreiner is a freaking idiot for naming this sound that. So what happens in manufacturing is they get these sounds, they lease them, and Bill makes them change names and yada, 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 and then they don't ask anybody that really knows what's going on. So I got this sound, which is a group yipow, and it's called hunting whines on the Dog Soldier electronic calls. And last year, I would sit down and I would do the hunting whines, and then I would go immediately to, I think it was called Submissive Pup, which was just, kind of a little bit of a moaning with a yip and a bark or two. And I tore them up this year. Just with a technique, I hardly ever, I feel ashamed because I fell into the sit down, push a couple buttons, kill stuff, go home mode, Sometimes you get them sounds that, I don't know if it's so much the coyotes haven't heard it before, but it's almost like it changes year to year, but sometimes you just hit that lick and it keeps on rolling. But it's, one thing you taught me is, subtleness. And everybody asks me, what's your favorite howl? I always say a subtle one. And I believe the most number one sold sound right now commercially is probably still a male challenge or a coyote challenge howl, because it sounds cool and sometimes it works and coyotes come in aggressive sometimes. But I always stick to the subtle, and I don't bark a whole lot either. I remember you telling me it's so easy to be too aggressive when you're barking.
Well, the thing that's why this bark howl. I don't use the word challenge because that denotes an invitation to do battle, and coyotes don't do that. Elk do, you challenge bugles and such, and that's probably why they hung that tag on that. But coyotes don't issue an invitation to do battle. They demand that an intruder leave now or else. It's just that simple. And that's what this screaming, hysterical threat bark howls are all about. And they're extremely aggressive. And if you're in the edge of defended territory and you make that sound, every coyote you demand that every coyote within hearing leave now or else, they quite probably will. It'll have the exact opposite effect of what you were shooting for, the desired effect. But if you set up near a den during denning season and you do a threat bark howl, the results from the alpha pair and from the mature betas can be spectacular.
Yeah,
and it's a sight to behold, and that's probably the reason why it's so popular. All of these videos, especially with the dogs working, and when the grass is nice and green, so it's summer, You get all these hackled up coyotes coming in aggressively. They're in the vicinity of a den.
Yeah.
And that's the only time that you're going to be getting that effect with that sound. One of the sound that you were using, a non-threatening, kind of submissive sound, will excite social and territorial concerns amongst resident coyotes, because they're even if they have a low security level, this is non-threatening, and they do have to get around to investigating any unknown coyote within their territories, even if it's just over open home range and it's not defended. They will come investigate. So it's a great call to garner an approach from the resident coyotes. One thing that you have to keep in mind is that excuse me a minute. My little dog was insisting on going out, and she was going to leave me alone until I let her. Excuse me. If you're going to, for locating the very best call is the Scrupia Pal, because, like I said, he is a territorial declaration, and all resident coyotes will be compelled to respond to it, and you can make it even more compelling if you use it in a vehicle. If you suspect coyotes are in a certain area and you have a 2-track heading that way, or if you're on a Raptor bicycle and you've got an electronic call with Groupia Towel on it, Tyler and I will do this with our hand calls, our hand towers. We do Groupia Towel. Drive towards the suspected location, doing a Groupia Towel, and I would assume what's so effective is that they hear unknown coyotes approaching their position, and it literally rips up, because this is a primary defense mechanism, passive territorial defense, meaning that they can defend without actual physical confrontation. Yeah. It literally rips a response out of them. If they're there, they will answer.
Wow. That is a, I've got the Rambo bikes now, and I'm covering a lot of ground and making more stands and making them more quietly opposed to in a vehicle. And I've told everybody these tactics I'm going to implement in the 2017 and 18 season is going to change the game for me. Now, it's not necessary for everybody to do this, but it's going to change the demographic and the look of my show a little bit. I love the Rambo bikes. I love different tactics, and I love stepping out of the box. And so right there, Rich, here's what I had planned to do tonight. I had planned on just doing this podcast and just rolling with it and not stopping. But, okay, so here's going to dictate. Can I have you on again next Thursday night?
Sure.
Okay. Absolutely.
You're my only friend. Nobody else likes me.
Hey, I'm in the same boat, so I'll call you every damn Thursday. So what I'm going to do, and everybody is going to hate me because I'm watching the chat room and everybody is so into this, but I want everybody at home to realize that, it took a lot of years for me to soak up what Rich Higgens is teaching here. And you guys have this podcast for the rest of your lives on the YouTube channel, or until the liberals shut it down, and then it'll be on iTunes. But when you start talking different tactics, and we haven't even talked about Jaeger studies and the coyote's nose yet, I got to have you on next Thursday, because I don't mind going over even an hour, but me and you can't do this in another hour even. So
why not?
Well, it's going to take like 2 hours. You're going to have, I'm going to have to book you for a month, I think, to get. So,
one last thing then. We have one other issue of vital concern for those who want to use vocalizations to
okay.
locate and to call in coyotes. Shall we hit that right now, or do you want to wait until next week?
Let's hit that right now, and then we're going to close it up.
I'll make it real short for you then.
Oh, you don't have to make it short, but we can hit it right now, and it can take as long as it needs to take. But next week, I want to talk about off-the-wall Rich Higgens tactics, but I want to talk about the coyote's nose, and that's an hour in itself.
I've never been able to finish that one in an hour.
Well,
we'll take a good stab at it.
Yeah, we'll
try. I can make this one real short. I just the time got away from me too. It's 8:07.
Well, people are commenting. People are commenting. Do it for a month. Sweet, I agree. Month all night long, or all month long. so we're gonna roll with this. If we're going to touch on the howling a little bit longer, and we're going to run a little bit over, and then we're going to cut it off here in a minute, and then we're going to talk next week, and then we'll see how we get along, and we're going to roll with this for a while. I didn't have any other guest booked this month, but I had some other agendas that can absolutely wait, because I want all this together, because me and you click so good, and we talk so good, and we conversate so good. This is really good stuff, and I don't want it to end. So let's finish.
Wow, I've never conversated with it before.
I made up a word the other day. It's called validity.
English is a live language. It's constantly growing. You're just helping it along a little.
I also made up a word. I say epic a lot. I'm like, this is epic, and then I catch people. I'm always like, rock on, this is epic, and then I watch a show on TV, or somebody sends me a screenshot and somebody else saying that's epic. So I made up a new word, epicicity. Epicicity. I'm gonna charge people to say that one.
I'll have it engraved on something.
Okay.
I'll make you a howler and engrave that on it.
There you go. Okay, so here's what we're going to do. Let's finish our howling talk. Let's talk about the vitals of howling, and then we'll go from there.
Well, we don't have to talk about that. I just wanted to drop an absolute jewel,
yes,
a real pearl on everybody that's listening, and it's a short. Dr. Jaeger, I have a huge brief of all of his studies and his dissertations and theses, and every time that he's published, he sends me a copy of whatever it is, simply because he knows that I'm a fan, and I truly do appreciate it. And he's an educator, and so Dr. Jaeger and Dr. Mitchell and his wife, Dr. McHagan, and a grad student named Barrett published a paper that was titled "Information Content of Coyote Barks and Howls," and it was an eye opener. It was an immediate epiphany, and in this study, they conducted discriminant analysis of spectrograms of recorded coyote barks and howls, and they concluded that because of the variations in the length, shape, and volume of the supralaryngeal vocal tract, coyote vocalizations are individually specific. It means that coyotes can identify the howls of coyotes that are known to them, group members and even members of adjacent packs, which is no great stretch of imagination, because my daughter used to play soccer over in North Scottsdale, and on Sundays they would that huge field out there would have 6 or 7 games going at the same time, and there'd be several hundred kids out there yelling too. I could pick my daughter's voice out. All of that cacophony. And so believing that a coyote can recognize the voices of coyotes that are known to them is no stretch. But that study and others since have determined that highly specific information that's regarding their identity and size and age and sex and even emotional state are encoded in coyote howls. Think about that for a minute. That's all I'm going to give you, but what that means is that because they can recognize the voices of coyotes that are known to them, and because so much information is actually encoded in these howls, information, identity, size, age, sex, emotional state, all of that is encoded in coyote howls. You're a great howler. Do you have any idea how you're able to encode the fact that you're a 2-year-old, 23-pound female that's lonely into your howls?
I'm sitting here like, you're telling me this, and I know where you're getting your information, and I've known you for a long time, and I'm soaking up every word, and I'm hanging on that cliff again, that dirt ledge. Why are we, I'm not being big-headed here, but why am I so successful howling when I'm not a coyote? Here's
the thing. The results of this study have simply convinced me that we can never convince any coyote that we are a lost family member or we're a lost puppy, or even, I'm not even convinced that we are convincing them that we are another coyote. Because I hear some god-awful howls that sound more like sirens than coyotes. But then again, maybe that's why they respond to sirens so well. It's because it sounds like some kind of god-awful howling from some kind of god-awful beach from Guardians of the Galaxy. What this means to me is that we can't convince any coyote that we are a family member or group member, or that we're a lost puppy. I'm not even convinced that we're convincing them that we're another coyote, but they react instinctually, not intellectually or with reason, to vocalizations.
I just remember.
And what they are hearing is a competitor, and they respond to as they would to a competitor. And so that's why it's very, very important to us to keep it less aggressive and calling as many of these coyotes because, again, social and territorial concerns coupled with curiosity and entertainment, if their security levels are high enough, they'll respond. They'll come in and check it out for any of those 4 reasons right there.
I just remembered something you taught me, and I love this podcast so much I don't want to ever stop. So I remember one time I'm picking your brain and we're riding around in the Bronco and we're doing our thing. And I remember saying, we got to talking about, I remember talking about being subtle and aggressive and everything else. And you told me, you said this right here. You said, and I remember it like it was yesterday now, and it just popped in my head. You said, Steve, if a drunk guy falls on the sidewalk and is screaming and yelling and cussing everybody, nobody's going to help that son of a bitch. But if a little girl falls down and scuffs her knee and she's whimpering and helpless, everybody's going to try to be a hero. You remember telling me that?
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
The difference between aggressive and submissive vocalization.
Yes. I'm on to something here. I'm bringing back... I hope I don't remember shit I ain't supposed to. Like the time we put the dead coyote on, we tied it to Vic Carlson's axles. You remember that?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit there. I didn't, what you said.
You remember when we tied the dead coyote to Vic Carlson's axles?
Vic Carlson. I was laughing about that today. I missed that guy.
I talked to him.
Do you remember what that was about?
I don't remember the whole story, but I remember me and you hijacked Randy Shaw's night vision, and we crawled out through that desert with this damn stinking stiff coyote and tied it to his truck.
Through all of that cactus, and we were drunker than a skunk, we're laughing, we're bumping into each other, I'm falling down. Those were our drinking days back then.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the reasons why I quit. But Vic had, the previous year at our camp out, he and Tim Bealey had um, dug a pit in the sandy wash where I parked my Bronco and where we slept, because we slept in the back of the Bronco. I just put the tailgate down. And we had a big air mattress there, and Tyler and I slept there. And I parked the same place every time. They dug a hole in sand and buried a gut-shot coyote from a couple of days before in that thing. It just covered it with a little bit of sand. I woke up, I don't know how many times that night, with this god-awful stench, and I'd raise up and I look over, and Gerald Stewart had brought in a porta potty, and it was parked about 10 yards away off to my left. And I kept thinking, that's what most god-awful shitter I have ever smelled, and it's keeping me awake because I was so tired and I had so much to drink that I just go through it again. Well, that was Vic. So this next year, I was ready for him. I went to PetSmart and I got a dog collar, and for $5 I had one of those little tags that go on it, the name Spot on it, and it got a leash. And you and me put that on that coyote, and we dragged it over there to Vic's little Toyota truck. And we put the leash on the bumper and stuffed that coyote up underneath the transaxle or somewhere up in there. And I had in my mind visions of Vic driving down I-10, dragging his coyote like Chevy Chase, on vacation. People honking and Vic's too observant.
And keep on going. How about that?
Okay. If we're going to do this, and you want to discuss the coyote olfactory process,
absolutely.
I would like to have a couple of your sponsors, anybody that's involved in the scent suppression or cover scent or any of those products, either listen or join in with us.
Okay.
Because I'm hoping to learn something here, why nobody ever addresses it. There's people like Scentlock.
Yeah.
It would behoove them to approach this scientifically and explain to everybody why their system works, and it does. But everybody says, can't fool a coyote's nose. Don't waste your money. They're wrong, and Scentlock is losing money, and the people that sell these scent suppression products would probably sell more if they knew and understood how this process works.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Anyway,
you know how I broke the ice with? I'm with Wildlife Research, and I have been for 5 or 6 years, and they sell Scent Killer Gold. And how I broke the ice with them is I just told them everything you taught me, more or less. The coyote's going to smell me, but there's certain applications, certain situations, and there's certain factors. I've used scent eliminate. I always wash my clothes in it. I mean, I'm kind of a head case like that, but I've seen a lot of coyotes downwind, and I've seen a lot of coyotes smell me, and I've seen a lot of coyotes act not only, poorly, but I've seen them act very good. And so we're going to talk about that next week. I doubt I'll be able to get any of them guys on because them big corporate companies, it's hard to get them pinned down this time of year. But I will do some research this week, and I'll try to get a hold of some of them guys and get to some of the scientific technology behind at least Scent Killer. But I do know the scientific technology behind colloidal silver and silver alone. So, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going on in the market right now, especially with base layers and moisture-wicking garments that activate silver. And so I'm going to let you go, Rich, and I will call you next week at 8 o'clock Mountain Time. Is that a deal?
That's a deal.
Thanks.
Always a pleasure with you, Steve.
Man, thanks for being on. This has been like the most badass podcast ever, and I'm just glad it's mine. So
we'll plan another one of those celebrity campouts again.
Absolutely. That was some good times, and I would like to see if we could bring all together. We talked a little bit about it today, on the phone. I designed this podcast to bring the industry together, and there's just too much damn black tape for people to be friends in public anymore. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're gonna do that. I'm still gonna try. I mean, that's just, you know me. That's the nature of the beast. I kind of wear my heart on my sleeve a little bit, and I care actually what people think. So I'd like to see us all together again. So, all right, Rich. Well,
Would be fun.
thanks for being on, and I'll talk to you next week.
Thanks a lot, Steve. I'll talk to you next
brother.
week.
Be good. All right, everybody. That's Rich Higgens from Arizona. Rich, I've known him for years and years and years, and he is absolutely so knowledgeable about coyotes. I knew this podcast was going to go over, but I thought I could roll with it, and I'm obviously not going to be able to roll with it. This is liable to last 2 or 3 more weeks. I don't know. I know when we're talking next week, we're going to talk about special tactics. I will touch base a little bit on the Rambo bikes. I am going to have some podcasts in the future just about tactics and Rambo bikes, or walking, or riding a pedal bike. You don't have to utilize the tools I do, but like I said, the show is really fine-tuned right now, and I'm not using no gimmicks, and I'm using stuff that works for me, and I'm using stuff that will kill more coyotes. Once again, this podcast has been brought to you by TacticalPredatorHunter.com for all your Dog Soldier approved gear. Hey, I love you guys. I'm glad you're listening to the podcast. This has been an awesome podcast. It's going to go straight to YouTube. I'm going to edit off the few minutes that weren't playing, to begin with. It's going to start right up. And if you're on an iPhone platform or Apple platform, it will be on iTunes. Once again, I'm Steve Kreiner, the Dog Soldier. Peace out, homies. Remember, keep your head up, move forward, stay fearless. Don't apologize to anyone, and thank a veteran, because without them, we have nothing. Catch you next week.